Hello and welcome to our workshop on interpreting the new neonicotinoid regulations for wine grapes. Happy to have you here on behalf of the Napa Ag Commissioner's Office. Let's go ahead and get started. So what are the neonicotinoids? Well, they're synthetic chemical insecticides that, not surprisingly, are similar to nicotine, hence the name. They were first registered for ag use in the 90s. And they're used as a broad spectrum insecticide and replaced carbamates and organophosphates pretty widely, and that was great. Unfortunately, it was also found that neonics created a lot of harm to bees and pollinators. Most widely used group of insecticides in the world, with 25% of the world's agrochemical use. Some areas have completely banned them, but not in California. We're just having a little more restrictions on how we use the neonics. So this is an interesting graph, and it just shows what neonic use looks like in California. And at the very bottom of the chart, you'll see that neonics represent only a small amount of the overall pesticides used in California, with sulfur having the overwhelming majority of use. And interesting that Fresno, Kern, Tulare, Monterey, and San Joaquin are applying the most in California. So why did this regulation come about? Why did we develop this? Well, first we recognized, by we, I mean the state of California, recognize the importance of honeybees and pollinators in ag settings, but also just in the general environment. And if the neonics are lethal to honeybees and other pollinators, well, it's pretty obvious we need to make some changes. So we need to protect pollinators from exposure risks to neonics. What in the world are we talking about in terms of who has to follow these regulations? For right now, it is just production agriculture. We do not use this regulation to apply to structural pest control or home use, and also non-production ag, parks and cemeteries. In the future, that may change, but for right now, production agriculture is all we're talking about. So this slide's very important. This is the one that you need to memorize if you can. These are the 4 specific neonics that belong to a specific class of neonics that are impacted by this regulation. These are the only 4 products that the regulation refers to, so it's important to know exactly what they are. And you can see some of the example products that we use plenty of here in Napa. All of that should look familiar to you. But when I say a group of 4 mentioned in the regulations, this is the stuff I'm talking about right here. So in Napa County, the neonic usage is pretty straightforward. I mean, we've had actually a decrease over time, but I don't know, if it's really that impactful. Over 13,000 acres and over 600 applications. It's a fair amount, but not a huge amount. So obviously, one of the first things we want to talk about here, and let's get down to the nuts and bolts. Application of a neonic is prohibited during bloom. Well, you probably already knew that, right? That's pretty basic stuff. So you'll need to know for each crop you grow, when is the blooming period. And also, this right here is sort of like the one paragraph that you're going to need to know about. It's not as complicated as it sounds. So let's take a look at this. All it says is that if you use both a soil and foliar application method, or if you use multiple neonic active ingredients of those 4 named in the previous slide, a total maximum combined application rate of 0.3 pounds of active ingredient per acre per season may be applied. And it means that if the soil rate, if you use a soil application, that rate must not exceed 0.2. If you use a foliar rate, that rate must not exceed 0.1. So soil app rate doesn't exceed 0.2. Foliar app rate does not exceed 0.1 for a combined total of 0.3. And again, looking at that first paragraph, that trigger is if you use both a soil and foliar application, or if you use more than one of the Neonic ingredients of the 4 named in the regulation from that previous slide. So let's talk about some scenarios. This really helps us understand what that little paragraph means. Let's think of some possible combinations that you might see in your spray program. For the following scenarios, though, I do want you to make the assumption that no managed pollinators are present because we don't use them here in Napa. Think about the trucks carrying millions of bees down in the Central Valley. Those are managed pollinators. We don't have that going on here, so you can assume that they're not present. If they were present, we'd have to look at some different restrictions. So we get to keep it simple here because pretty much we're just talking about wine grapes here. Use on small berries and small fruits. This is one of like 27 crop groups, all of which have slightly different regulations. So we only need to know about the wine group 1 here today. A soil and foliar application are going to be made with imidacloprid within the same growing season. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're planning on making both a soil and foliar application with imidacloprid, which is in that group of 4. So what do you think? Does that trigger the regulation? It does. It means that this should look familiar. A total maximum combined application rate of 0.3, and the soil rate must not exceed 0.2, and the foliar rate must not exceed 0.1 for that total of 0.3. It's a lot of words, but it's not too complicated. So that paragraph right there is pretty much, you know, the only thing that you need to know to do. You just need to know when it has to be done. So in this case, since you're doing a combination, you're doing a soil and foliar application, the regulation is triggered. All right, scenario 2. Now we're going to apply multiple Neonic active ingredients of the 4 names. So we're going to use imidacloprid and one of the other ones, like say dinotefuran, something of that nature. So that means that because we're using more than one of the active ingredients of the 4, well, that triggers the regulations. So there's that paragraph again. It's exactly the same. You can sing along with me here. It's going to be 0.3 pounds of AI per acre, and the soil rate must not exceed 0.2, and the foliar rate must not exceed 0.1. That's all there is to it. Scenario 3. So imidacloprid, one of the 4, is used in combination with acetamiprid. That's a different neonic. That was not on that slide I showed you of the 4 named neonics. So you're going to use those 2 in combination in a foliar only application. What do you think? Yes or no? Do we trigger the regulation? Well, this application won't trigger any restrictions from the regulation. All you have to do is follow the label for both of those pesticides. Again, the reason is that you're only using one of the neonics that's named in the regulation, and the one you're combining isn't named in the reg, so no harm, no foul, and you're only using a single type of application, not a combination of foliar and soil. All right, let's move to the last scenario. In this case, we're going to take that same imidacloprid, one of the 4, and we're going to use it in combination with the acetamiprid. Same thing, different type of neonic, so we know, all right, we don't have to worry about that one because it's not one of the named 4. But we have to pay attention because imidacloprid is. But this time, we're going to use a combination of foliar and soil applications. You all should know the answer to this one. This would trigger restrictions on the imidacloprid. and just follow the label for the acetamiprid. The reason is imidacloprid is one of the four, and you are making both a foliar and soil application. So it's just that simple. And here it is one more time, chapter and verse right there. You get a total of 0.3 active ingredient per acre, but you've got to break it down to 0.2 soil, 0.1 for the foliar rate. So it's really not too bad. I'm hoping that you can sort of adapt these four scenarios to some of the things that you might want to do in your spray program coming up. And let's just take a look at a couple more things related to this regulation. There are some exemptions. And one of them is interesting. It talks about how if you use insect exclusionary netting or some type of a structure, you can apply to commodities within that. And we had a very interesting question at one of the seminars we gave on the new Neonic regulations. And one of the growers said, well, hey, if I've got, a bad vine mealybug problem in one corner of my vineyard, if I use insect exclusion netting in there, can I ignore the regulation? Well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't think you could do that over 2 acres, but if you have a small corner that you want to treat with a little stronger mix there, I would suggest that you give us a call and let's have a look. Let us take a look at that situation. But it's a possibility, because if you've got a real focal problem, we might be able to work with that. So keep that in mind. Also, applications can be made to address a local emergency or to control a quarantine pest. And keep in mind that even though a local emergency is definitely an emergency to you, meaning if it's local to your vineyard, I'm talking about local emergency in terms of an entire area or region, and that is determined by the state agencies along with quarantines. And also Section 18. Section 18 is kind of similar. It's called a special local needs. It takes a while to get one of these. Again, it won't be something that you'd be doing. The Ag Commissioner's Office would be involved with the state in doing something like that. And then also, lastly, applications authorized for research purposes. And unfortunately, this can't be your own research project. It has to be done through an official agency. Think like UC Co-op, some of the research that they do, stuff like that. All right, here's a no-brainer. Yeah, you do have to follow the regulation. All growers and applicators must follow what we just talked about. And the regulations apply in addition to any requirements that are actually on the original Neonic labeling that you'll see on the container. And if there's a conflict between labeling requirements and regulations, the strictest requirement must be followed. I have not seen in the wine grape category there, in that crop group, any of the neonics that have a stricter label requirement than they do under the regulation. But I imagine in other crop groups it could be possible, but I don't think we need to worry too much about it here. But do keep in mind that because product labels are not going to be updated with these requirements, it means that you need to know them on your own. If you think of it this way, the label is the law and it's still the same label that you're used to, but you need to hold the new regulation kind of over that. It's a standalone regulation that kind of is a hierarchy over the label. Try to wrap your head around that one a little bit. It's sort of like, okay, if the regulation is triggered, then I have to know all this in addition to what you see on the actual label rates. One other little tip for you here when you use your pesticide use reports. This will keep us from getting errors that are very time consuming for both you and I. So please take a look at this. When you report a soil application of a neonic through, say, chemigation, go ahead and use the other category instead of ground, or certainly not air, probably not fumigation, but just use other and report foliar application of neonics as a ground application. So right now, if I were there with you, I would be taking your questions. But since this is just a video, I would like to invite you to please let me know if you have any further questions or have something that you need to run by me. There's my phone number and my email. So please feel free to give us a call and let us know if there's anything else that we can work with you on. I know that this has created a little bit of a ruckus over how to interpret these regulations, but hopefully you saw in this video that it's really not that bad. If you can just remember that one paragraph and what the 4 ingredients you need to look out for, then you're good to go. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to view this video, and I'll see you out there.